Gardening can be for one person working alone, but it can also be a way to cultivate a connection with neighbors. Either approach can benefit from the annual Gardeners Gathering organized by the City of Boston and the Trustees. To tell us about this year's event is the Engagement Site Manager for the Trustees, Michelle de Lima. Thank you very much for being with us, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
I want to have you start with one of the topics that's going to be brought up at this event, because you have a speaker who's coming up talking about food justice. What does that mean?
Well, she kind of ties in the food movement, the local food movement and all of that to a lot of other social justice movements. So it's not just, suburban or more well-off urban people having access to fresh food, but making sure that people of all different income levels have access. And so she's going to talk about that. We're going to, in her keynote speech or in her special guest speech at the opening plenary, and then we're also going to convene a bunch of people who are working on that kind of work here in Boston. So some youth from the Food Project in Dudley are going to join us, people from Revision House and the Urban Farming Institute, and a lot of other people who are doing that work in Boston are going to come together with her to talk about community organizing, make some connections, and try to further that work of food justice.
Well, some of the organizations you mentioned are they're well developed, they're established, and they have these food programs, and it sounds like a professional operation. But what about the way to food justice through a do-it-yourself? You get a plot in the community garden. I mean, how important is that?
I think it's really important. It's sort of the teach a man to fish kind of theory of things. If you learn to grow your own food and you can do it yourself, you can do it anywhere on whatever scale, whether it's containers on a porch or a patio or a windowsill, or the community gardens where people really do grow a lot of fresh food and supplement their diets.
And I guess the good news is that, for people who might have walked past one of these gardens, year after year, they might have availabilities, and they're pretty well scattered through most of the neighborhoods.
Yeah, there are actually 176 to 180 around the city of Boston, and the trustees own 55 of those. And we're starting a new one this year in the Jones Hill neighborhood of Dorchester with the support of the city. So they're all over the place, and even if you haven't seen them, they're tucked away.
If you're just starting out with something like this, how could an event like the Gardeners Gathering help you with that?
It's a fantastic place to get started learning, because we have workshops such as planning and mapping out your garden, where you can figure out, what should I grow and when should I plant it and how can I make it most productive. Things like starting your own seeds. If you want to get a little more creative and introduce something like chickens or bees to your backyard garden, you can learn that here too.
Now, one of the other topics I said was getting tomatoes in focus. What does that mean?
So tomatoes are the sort of diva of the garden. They take a lot of attention. They are showy, and it's not really a party without them. So we are having somebody, Joy Gary from Revision House, from Revision Urban Farm, is going to talk all about all of the various intricacies of growing tomatoes and how you trellis them and what varieties to choose and how you take care of them so they produce really well.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Michelle de Lima from the Trustees. Another topic here is no-till gardening. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure this is not just people who don't like to work too hard. So explain, how does that help?
I'm glad you asked about that. We're actually doing an intensive on it, 2 sessions, because it's a really important topic, I think. No-till, there's a whole bunch of components that go into it, but basically it's not using a rototiller or on a farm scale, not using a tractor, and maybe not even overdoing it with a garden fork, and instead building your soil, letting it stay in place, adding mulch, and you can really help the soil ecosystem that way so that you can have fewer weeds, healthier crops, and yes, less work.
Now another thing you've got here listed is mushrooms. I associate this with Russian food, walking through the woods, the silent hunt.
Yes.
But you can do it in Boston. You're right here, great Massachusetts.
Yes. So foraging is great, and for those of us who have access, there are some good wild mushrooms that you can find in Massachusetts, and we do have a workshop on urban foraging. But this is about cultivating mushrooms. So even if you have a tiny amount of space, you can do it indoors in a little kit, or you can make your own kit out of sawdust or coffee chaff. I won't give you all the details because Dan Benstenhoff, who's teaching the workshop, will do that. But you can grow shiitakes, lion's manes, oysters, all kinds of gourmet mushrooms, either outside or inside in a small, dark space.
Now, there's one other topic here which is very interesting. This is youth organizing. Now, we've talked about why gardening is good for, the moms and dads or whatever, but why is it so important for young people?
I'm glad you asked about that. I think it's vital for the connection to the environment that it creates and the sort of sense of stewardship that you can get when you connect with why soil is important, why conserving water is important, and all of that. And I think for people to grow up with that is very important. And then, of course, the appreciation for fresh food and for healthy vegetables and physical exercise, all of that, it's never too early to start.
What about the young people in the South? I mean, do they really get into this?
They absolutely do. Yeah. Kids of all ages and young people, teenagers, can really connect with each other and with the food and the work. And you'll see if you come to the Gardeners Gathering, the youth from the Food Project, I think, are a great example of that. And we have our own youth conservation crew that does urban ag too, and they're
Now, what's it like when you get a bunch of people like this in one room talking to each other?
Well, there's a lot of geeking out about gardens, but I think a lot of really good knowledge sharing that happens, even in the informal spaces, not in the workshops, just when you're, hanging out, waiting for things. There's a lot of networking and a lot of sharing stories and tips and how did you do with the drought last year and that kind of thing.
We should mention, just make sure people don't miss this now, this is going to be at Northeastern University, and the exact time we're talking about is...
Yes, so registration starts at 11, and Mayor Walsh will be presenting the Community Garden Awards as he does annually at around noon, but people should come early in case we stay.
And we should get that date on the calendar. What is it going to be?
Yes, March 18th, Saturday, so it's very soon. It's just next Saturday, and 11 to 5.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
From the trustees, Michelle de Lima. We'll have more news in just a moment.